Breaking news. South Africa's much-hyped national dialogue, sold as a historic chance to bring the nation together, collapsed before it even started. What was supposed to be a moment of unity turned into a scene of chaos, mistrust, and political theater. The day began with delays, faulty microphones, and an audience already losing patience. When President Cyril Ramaphosa finally walked on stage, he spoke of unity, poverty, inequality, gender, and LGBTQ+ rights. But his words fell flat. Outside, opposition parties had walked out. Inside, ordinary citizens shouted him down. The event meant to heal divisions only exposed them for the world to see. This wasn't just another messy political gathering. It was a reflection of deeper problems. Household budgets crushed by inflation, tensions over race and class, and a government accused of controlling the narrative instead of listening. The bigger question now, if South Africa, once celebrated as a model of democracy, cannot even hold a credible national dialogue, what does that mean for its role in Africa and the wider world? Even before the first session, major parties and respected civic groups had already pulled out. The Democratic Alliance, Action SA, Freedom Front Plus, and others all said the same thing. This wasn't about citizens anymore. What was meant to be grassroots had become an ANC-controlled stage. When the convention finally opened, it was a mess. Ramaphosa showed up late. Microphones failed. Screens flickered. Protesters gathered outside while journalists inside called the event embarrassing, chaotic, and symbolic of the state itself. And as Ramaphosa repeated old promises, citizens online weren't buying it. A Newsroom Africa poll asked if the dialogue was collapsing before it began. 74% said yes. Meanwhile, the numbers tell the real story. In 2011, a basic basket of goods cost about 350 rand. By 2025, that same basket costs nearly 1,500 rand, a 365% increase. Salaries and social grants? Barely moved. 4 million surviving on just 350 rand a month. Life isn't just hard, it's impossible. One participant put it simply, how can you talk about dignity when we can't even afford bread? This wasn't only about economics. It was also about exclusion. Afrikaner communities, often labeled as privileged, argued they'd been pushed out of public universities and state contracts. Forced to build their own schools and institutions, they accused the president of turning reconciliation into division. When Ramaphosa raised the issue of race and privilege, the wounds reopened instantly. The promise of dialogue was inclusion. But in practice, microphones were cut, speakers interrupted, and angry citizens silenced. One viral clip showed a man storming the stage, shouting, "This government are liars," before his mic was muted. Another delegate pleaded, "We are the foot soldiers. We came at 4 a.m. to be heard. If this is a dialogue for us, then why are you shutting us down?" His words, raw and desperate, summed up the whole process. A dialogue where citizens can't speak is not a dialogue, it's theater. And South Africans saw it. The symbolism was devastating. What was meant to show progress revealed instead a ruling party afraid of its own people. The ANC had hoped for applause. It got anger, protest, and ridicule. And things only got worse. What began with technical hiccups turned into open confrontation. Delegates scheduled to speak found their turns cancelled. Microphones died mid-sentence. Ushers rushed nervously as tempers rose. A community organizer took the platform, voice shaking with anger. "This government has lied to us. They cut our voices because they fear the truth." The crowd erupted in applause, but state-aligned cameras quickly turned away. Transparency became choreography. The broadcast was edited in real time. Minutes later, a young delegate who had queued since dawn spoke for those without motorcades or security. "We are the foot soldiers. You promised a people's dialogue, but you shut us down. Who is this really for?" His question landed like a hammer, unanswered, but definitive. Around him, workers, parents, students, clergy, ordinary people, nodded in agreement. This wasn't abstract politics. It was lived exclusion. Outside, the streets became a second chamber. Protesters held placards, "No dialogue without the people." 30 years of promises. The chants were steady, not violent, just weary and insistent. Online, the story spread even faster. Hashtags critical of the process trended. Clips of a blinking president under harsh lights, citizens being silenced, security dragging away speakers, all went viral. But the most powerful posts weren't angry slogans. They were quieter: grocery receipts, electricity bills, bus schedules. Daily struggles attached to captions like, "We needed answers, not theater." Even South Africa's usually cautious broadcasters couldn't hide their frustration. A News 24 analyst called the dialogue a missed moment that revealed a government afraid of its own citizens. International outlets picked up the quote, pairing it with images of a broken sound desk and Ramaphosa's late arrival. The optics were brutal. If a nation cannot hold a conversation with itself, how can it convince the world it can steady the ship? When even the microphones seem to fear the crowd, the dialogue has already failed. Political reactions followed familiar lines but carried sharper edges. Parties that stayed away, Action-SA, the Freedom Front Plus, said they'd been proven right. Civil society groups that once engaged in good faith announced they would not return unless ground rules changed. Independent chairs, guaranteed speaking slots, unedited broadcasts. Even faith leaders, usually cautious, began to question whether the state still knew the difference between facilitation and control. But the most powerful reaction came from ordinary households. WhatsApp groups across townships and suburbs pulsed with the same refrain, "We are done with excuses." A retired teacher from Soweto told a radio host, "The president does not want dialogue. He wants obedience." People didn't speak in policy jargon. They spoke in bus fares, clinic queues, school fees, and the rising cost of cooking oil. For them, the failure wasn't measured in headlines. It was measured in invoices. Business groups chimed in too. Their language wasn't fiery, but it was chilling: uncertain policy environment, loss of credibility, elevated risk. For investors, these weren't just embarrassing images. They were warning signs of a country sliding into unpredictability, the one thing markets refused to pay for. Inside the hall, officials tried to regain control with tighter schedules and stricter rules. It backfired. Delegates saw it as proof that the citizen-led promise had been revoked. The gap between what the dialogue claimed to be and what people actually experienced became the story. No agenda item closed. No roadmap was presented. Security thickened. Cameras cut. The crowd dispersed, angry, cold, and unconvinced. In living rooms across the country, the question shifted from, "What will this dialogue decide?" to, "Why should we believe the next one?" Before we move on, if you want clear, fearless reporting on Africa's politics, subscribe to Africa Unchained. Your support lets us deliver in-depth coverage, no spin, no fear. The bigger question isn't whether the dialogue failed. It's what happens when people stop believing dialogue can work at all. The collapse didn't stay inside the convention center. It spilled into daily life, amplifying a betrayal South Africans have felt for years. For citizens already battered by inflation, unemployment, and failing services, this wasn't just bad theater. It was proof that their voices don't matter. Civil society groups quickly declared they were done with government-led consultations. Activists accused the ANC of turning a citizens' platform into a stage-managed spectacle. For ordinary South Africans, the event revealed a bitter truth: their leaders are no longer facilitators of democracy. They are gatekeepers of silence. One community organizer in Cape Town summed up the mood: "We showed up in good faith, but what we got was humiliation. The government doesn't listen. It dictates." When democracy begins to feel like dictatorship in disguise, the social contract starts to unravel. The economic fallout was immediate. Investor confidence, already fragile, took another hit as images of chaos spread worldwide. Credit agencies downgraded outlooks, citing instability and collapsing public trust. Inflation keeps grinding away at household incomes. Since 2011, the cost of basic goods has surged by 365%, while wages remain stagnant. That statistic has become a rallying cry. painted on placards and shouted in protests. Prices go up, but nothing changes. For businesses, the failed dialogue signaled danger. Multinationals quietly reconsidered expansion plans, wary of strikes and instability. Local entrepreneurs face an even harsher reality: shrinking consumer spending and a suffocating economy. Politically, the ANC now faces its deepest crisis since apartheid's end. Opposition parties point to the dialogue's collapse as proof the ruling party has lost touch. Civil society groups are emboldened, calling for reforms, new elections, even constitutional change. Inside the ANC itself, younger members are questioning whether today's leaders still reflect the party's founding values. This fragmentation feeds an even darker prospect: instability. South Africa, once hailed as a beacon of democracy, now risks being seen as fragile and adrift. International observers warn that the erosion of dialogue could deepen ethnic and racial divides, turning tension into lasting distrust. For ordinary South Africans, these aren't abstract fears. They're lived realities: longer food queues, higher prices, unreliable clinics, collapsing schools. Each broken promise chips away at the hope democracy once carried. A young graduate in Durban put it plainly: "We studied, we worked hard, and yet we still can't afford to live." If dialogue doesn't work, what's left for us? When people lose faith in dialogue, what follows isn't conversation. It's confrontation. The collapse of the dialogue was more than a political misstep. It was a national alarm bell. Civil trust is eroding, the economy is faltering, and the political order itself is fracturing. And the world noticed. For Washington, Brussels, and London, the scenes of chaos broadcast across global media carried heavy symbolism. South Africa has long been held up as proof that dialogue could heal even the deepest scars of apartheid. The collapse struck at the heart of that story. In the US, analysts on CNN and Bloomberg framed it as a warning of democratic backsliding. A nation once seen as a cornerstone of stability now looks unsteady. American policymakers voiced concern, not only for South Africa's democracy, but for their own interests. South Africa isn't just another partner. It's a BRICS member, a regional powerhouse, and a voice in global debates on energy and trade. Instability here raises hard questions for Washington. If Pretoria can't steady itself, what does that mean for America's influence in Africa? In Europe, the reaction was pointed. Brussels called on the ANC to restore credibility through inclusive governance. But behind the careful language, concern ran deeper. The EU relies on South Africa for minerals critical to green energy: platinum, manganese, cobalt. Any political instability sends ripples through markets already strained by war and energy shortages. European investors are asking the hard question: if a government cannot manage a national dialogue, how can it guarantee long-term contracts? The United Kingdom, with its historic ties and large South African diaspora, sounded an even sharper note. Commentators criticized what they saw as ANC arrogance. The Guardian warned of eroding democratic legitimacy. The Telegraph flagged the risk of capital flight. London sees the dialogue failure as proof South Africa could be heading into a period of prolonged uncertainty where neither politics nor the economy can be trusted. China and Russia read the crisis differently. Chinese state media downplayed the chaos, calling it the growing pains of a maturing democracy. Behind the scenes, Beijing signaled readiness to deepen ties, emphasizing trade and infrastructure over politics. Moscow took a similar stance, framing the situation as a matter of sovereignty and cautioning against Western interference. For both, South Africa's rift with the West is an opportunity to expand influence under the BRICS banner. Across Africa, reactions were a mix of concern and calculation. Neighboring Botswana and Namibia fear instability spilling over. Nigeria and Kenya are quietly reassessing their own approaches to national dialogue. African news outlets framed the collapse as a warning and a turning point. If South Africa cannot manage dialogue, what does it mean for democracy across the continent? Meanwhile, Pan-African voices see this as part of a larger struggle, a test of whether Africa can chart its own course without outside dictates. The stakes go beyond South Africa. The geopolitical consequences are clear. The The West sees a blow to its narrative of partnership and democratic progress. China and Russia see opportunity. And Africa itself faces a sobering reality. Sovereignty and credibility cannot be outsourced. They must be built at home. South Africa's failed national dialogue left the country at a dangerous crossroads. What should have been a moment of unity instead exposed deep fractures. Microphones cut out, protesters silenced, leaders arrived late, speeches rang empty. If the people's dialogue collapses so publicly, what hope remains for trust in institutions? History shows that when credibility vanishes, instability follows. And in South Africa, that instability doesn't stay contained. It reverberates across the continent, rattles markets, and opens space for external powers. If the ANC cannot rebuild confidence, the cost won't just be lost opportunities, it could be lost generations. The danger isn't only that the dialogue failed. It's that people may no longer believe dialogue is possible at all. Yet there's a silver lining. As African outlets note, this collapse is also a challenge and an opportunity for a rising Africa. South Africa was long held up as a democratic model, proof the continent could succeed. If that model falters, it risks cynicism abroad and despair at home. But it also forces a reckoning. Governance must be rebuilt not through empty ceremonies, but through accountability, inclusivity, and genuine trust. Western capitals will be watching closely. But the real question is South Africa's to answer. Will citizens accept another cycle of empty promises, or demand more? Will leaders keep manipulating dialogue, or will new voices rise to fill the space that was denied to them? The world is watching, yes, but more importantly, South Africans are watching their leaders. And patience is running out. Here's the key: democracy isn't measured by speeches, it's measured by voices actually being heard. If South Africa wants to move forward, it has to rediscover the courage to listen, truly listen, to its people. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think South Africa can recover from this failure, or has the trust between government and citizens already been broken beyond repair? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this breakdown resonated, support Africa Unchained by liking, sharing, and subscribing, so you don't miss our next deep dive into Africa's political story. This isn't just South Africa's story. It's Africa's story, and it's still unfolding.